Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're taking a really structured, objective look at a pretty highly debated piece of source material. It's called The Dark Laws of Primal Attraction. Now, just to be clear right out of the gate, we aren't here to endorse these methods. We're simply here to decode the psychological theories the author presents about dating, body language, and subconscious communication. The text actually makes some incredibly bold claims about what really drives human connection behind the scenes. And, well, we've distilled those core arguments down so we can unpack the whole shebang together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just picture this for a second. Imagine you're sitting right across from someone you are intensely attracted to. Instantly, your brain starts racing, right? What do you say? How do you keep the conversation flowing seamlessly without falling into those agonizing, awkward silences? Well, the author argues that in these high-stakes social interactions, the vast majority of men fall into a massive trap right at the starting line, and that trap is overthinking.
So, the source material proposes this fundamental reset, and it's based on a surprisingly simple mantra. Stop putting her on a pedestal. She is just a human. According to the text, the moment you start stressing over finding the perfect topic or the exact right words, your raw masculine energy is effectively neutralized before you even open your mouth. The author insists that to kill this overthinking, you have to fundamentally shift your entire perspective. You have to view the other person not as someone above you or below you for that matter, but simply as an equal. The argument here is that until you internalize that she is literally just a human being, everything else you try to do is just going to be built on this really shaky foundation of anxiety.
Now let's move on to the theoretical core of all this, the hidden mechanism, and how the subconscious radar works.
Okay, so the text introduces this fascinating driving force of connection that it calls the subconscious radar. The author claims that women are primarily emotional decision makers when it comes to attraction. Basically, the idea is that attraction isn't some logical math equation that you can just solve, it's an emotional current. This radar is described as an invisible, primal instinct that activates the literal second you walk into a room. It isn't actually listening to the words you're saying. Instead, it's scanning your overall vibe, analyzing your tiny micro-movements, and tuning into your emotional frequency. And according to this framework, if this radar accepts you, the logical mind simply follows along.
And this brilliantly illustrates a central conflict the book talks about, the logical brain versus the primal radar. So the logical brain values the safe, nice guy, who checks all the boxes on paper, right? He makes sense. But the primal radar, the text argues, responds powerfully to unpredictable or even chaotic men because it's checking for emotional frequency and a dominant presence, not a logical resume. The text claims this is exactly why the unpredictable man so often wins out. The logical brain might be absolutely screaming that he's a bad idea, but the primal radar just overrides it entirely, declaring, nope, this is the man.
All right, let's shift from theory to practice with the 3 dark laws, rewiring body language for dominance.
But hey, before we look at the specific rules, we really have to look at what the author tells us to just throw away. The source aggressively contrasts typical mainstream advice with what it calls the dark laws. Mainstream advice tells you to stand perfectly straight, keep your hands out of your pockets, hold your chin up, you know the drill. Well, the author dismisses literally all of this as superficial noise. Instead, the dark laws focus on 3 entirely different principles: physical restraint, the playful takeaway, and absolute comfort. The core argument here is that true status is never actually projected by rigidly trying to look perfect, but rather through mastering these specific, subtle psychological cues.
So let's break down rule number 1, the anti-lean. The author is incredibly specific about this. Never lean in. The text explains that when most men are interested in someone, they eagerly lean forward. It's natural, right? But subconsciously, this physical movement sends a glaring signal of desperation. It basically broadcasts the message, I want your approval. And according to the author's framework, the very moment her radar picks up on that desire for approval, your perceived value instantly drops. The instruction here is to lean back, relax, and just sit comfortably. You're supposed to look like you're simply observing the interaction, not actively trying to impress anyone. In this framework, your physical restraint is your power.
Which brings us to rule number 2, the playful takeaway. This rule is entirely about how you handle tests or pushback in a conversation. If the other person says something designed to push you away, the author's rule is to display the absolute willingness to walk away. The text argues that beautiful women are socially conditioned to be chaste, so when you refuse to panic and instead you just calmly pivot or prepare to leave, you effectively short-circuit that entire conditioning. By taking away your attention, the text claims, you flip a deep psychological instinct, which suddenly makes the other person want to pull you back.
The text actually provides an exact script for this playful takeaway. For instance, if she says she isn't looking for anything,
The source advises you to smile faintly, look her right in the eyes and say, "I know, I'm probably a bit too much for you to handle anyway. You seem like a nice girl." And then you just calmly walk away or pivot the conversation. Look at how those sentences are constructed. They're explicitly designed to demonstrate total, unbothered confidence. It's a psychological pivot within the author's framework, showing that you are entirely unfazed by her attempt to create distance.
So the crucial point is, it all culminates in rule number 3, the power of absolute comfort. The author states emphatically here that true dominance isn't stiffness, it's comfort. It is absolutely not about puffing out your chest or forcing some unnatural, stiff posture. Instead, it's about a deep, relaxed state of being that clearly communicates you are entirely secure in your environment.
Think about nervous rigidness for a second. Think about how you might sit if you were placed in a room with a high-status official, or maybe a famous celebrity. You'd likely be over-controlling your movements, sitting rigidly and feeling pretty anxious. Now contrast that with absolute comfort. Think about how you lounge on a couch with your absolute closest friend. Your limbs are spread out, you're completely relaxed, and you are utterly unbothered by any kind of judgment. The author posits a really profound psychological truth here. When you bring that exact level of relaxed, friend-couch comfort into a high-stakes interaction, the subconscious radar immediately registers that you view yourself as the highest-status person in the room.
Which brings us to the ultimate question posed by today's explainer. Does your body language signal eager desperation or absolute, unbothered comfort? We've decoded the source's claims that attraction is ruled not by logic, but by this primal radar that's constantly scanning for restraint, the willingness to walk away, and deep physical relaxation. Whether you agree with these dark laws or you find them a bit manipulative, the psychological mechanics they attempt to outline definitely offer a fascinating lens into human interaction. So, the next time you find yourself in a high-stakes conversation, take a moment to step back and observe. What frequency is your radar broadcasting? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will leave you to ponder that exact question.